Heartbeat Alaska is brought to you in part by Coca-Cola.
By Cook Inlet Region Incorporated, an Alaska Native corporation promoting economic and social progress for people throughout the state. By the generous support of the Alaska Native Health Board.
We are one people under one sky, with separate languages and ways. We are the heartbeat of Alaska. We open our hearts to you and welcome you to Heartbeat, Alaska.
Welcome to Heartbeat Alaska. I'm Jeannie Green, bringing you Native news across the North. Thank you so much for joining me. I'd like to say hello to the Alexi Jimmy family in Tooksuk Bay. As a matter of fact, hello to all our viewers in Tooksuk Bay. Thank you so much for watching Heartbeat Alaska. On today's Heartbeat, we have Native news from all over. We're starting a new segment as well. It's a community calendar. If you have news or events from your village or community, make sure you fax it to me. My fax number is area code 907 for those out of state, 272-7005. And our phone number here at Heartbeat Alaska and One Sky is 272-8111. On today's Heartbeat Alaska, John Active from KYUK has his report. We have news from all over the state. But first, here's Gary Fife with Native news across the nation.
This is Native News Across the Nation. I'm Gary Fife. The Clinton administration's nominee for Director of the Indian Health Service has appeared on Capitol Hill to face U.S. Senate confirmation hearings. On Thursday, January 27th, Dr. Michael Trujillo faced members of the Senate Indian Affairs Committee and some tough questions and criticism. Senators wanted to know what Trujillo planned to do with the troubled federal agency and how he planned to, as one senator put it, shake it up. Trujillo, who is a member of the Laguna Pueblo tribe, admitted that he faced an extremely difficult project. In his first idea, Trujillo said he would try and make any personnel cuts to the administrative end of the Indian Health Service. The IHS provides health care service to 1.3 million Native Americans at over 500 facilities. Trujillo's nomination is expected to sail through the U.S. Senate. A remark by Alaska's State House of Representatives Speaker about a Native legislator has sparked an angry exchange. House Speaker Ramona Barnes from Anchorage spoke with KTUU television and called Native Senator Georgiana Lincoln a bigot who hates white people. Barnes was speaking about rural water and sewer issues when the Athabascans' name came up and a remark came out. Barnes has since said that she was sorry for the comment and was willing to apologize. Lincoln said she was outraged that someone in a leadership position should make such a comment. Lincoln has called for an apology. Barnes did send Lincoln a 6-line, 1-paragraph letter saying, quote, "I responded in an inappropriate manner by calling you a bigot," unquote. Jeannie will have more and speak with Senator Lincoln next week. The Guatemalan Native woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize has started up a foundation to advocate for Native rights. Rigoberta Menchú has formed the Vicente Menchú Foundation in memory of her father, who fought for land reform and human rights in that country. Mr. Menchú was killed by Guatemalan military forces during a protest in 1980. The Menchú Foundation will work to support projects to fight for the social, economic, and political rights of natives of that nation. Menchú will use funds from the Nobel Award and private donations. This week saw a landmark of sorts in Native communications, a national link-up and call-in radio show. The American Indian Radio on Satellite project debuted its first effort. Eros sponsored a live community forum broadcast from Lincoln, Nebraska on Friday. The program was beamed to tribal stations on reservations across the nation and to public radio stations across the country. The Eros-sponsored forum panel focused on tribal sovereignty and other top issues of the day. When completed, the Eros project will link up all reservation stations and provide Native American programming on their own radio satellite channel. And finally, the issue of Native mascots, or mascots considered offensive to Native Americans, has taken an unusual turn at Fort Lewis College in Colorado. This time it's not a Native. The school's mascot is the Raider, and it uses a U.S. cavalry soldier charging on horseback, and some Native students want to get rid of it. Natives said the image is offensive because of past wars between the tribes and the U.S. Army. The cavalryman's logo, they say, is a reminder of past tragedies. The Native student voice has raised the issue, and school officials will formally discuss the idea of changing the logo this spring. This is Native News Across the Nation, and for Heartbeat Alaska, I'm Gary Fife.
Thanks, Gary. We'll be back with John Actor from KYUK right after these messages.
From Yakutat to Borough, Alaska newspapers publish news that makes a difference in your community. Information about events and activities that is timely, accurate, and dependable. Stories about people who make the news in your community. Stories about world events that affect your community. And stories that reflect the diversity of all Alaskans. If it makes a difference in your community, you can read about it in an Alaska newspaper. Subscribe now.
Joining us now from KYUK Public TV and Radio in Bethel is the report from South Central Alaska. John Active has the stories.
Thank you, Jeannie. Jamai, Alaska, Akumagwa. Here's the latest news from the Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas. The Bethel Harbor just got a new lease on life. After 8 years of delays, the federal government has finally approved repairs of the Bethel seawall. The work will extend the life of the city harbor for another 50 years. In recent years, parts of the seawall have collapsed during spring flooding. These failures make work on the seawall all the more urgent. Although Congress approved work on the seawall in 1986, the project got tangled in bureaucratic red tape. Engineering and design work had to be done first, and by the late 1980s, the rules of the game changed. The Army Corps of Engineers put a moratorium on erosion control projects. Senator Ted Stevens intervened by getting special legislation passed to get the project moving. Then the project stalled again. Paperwork for the project had to be reviewed by the right federal officials, so Stevens again intervened. The senator now believes the last of the federal hurdles are over. The total cost of the project is about $20 million. The feds will pay almost $15 million of that amount, and the city and state will make up the difference. When work begins, huge chunks of rock will be moved into place to shore up about 6,500 feet of riverbank. Senator George Jacko will have plenty of competition for his seat in the legislature. At least 4 people say they may run. The first to officially declare her candidacy is King Salmon nurse Mary Ann Wilson. Wilson says Jacko's ethics troubles made her decide to run, but that won't be the focus of her campaign. Rhonda McBride talked with Wilson when she brought her campaign to Bethel.
I've been a registered nurse for 25 years. I've provided primary health care in Bristol Bay for over 10 years. And in doing that, you develop a real special relationship with people and get to know them and the issues pretty intimately. I'm currently back in graduate school at the university. I'll be finished in December. I'm working on my master's in nursing. Politically, I've been on the Bristol Bay Borough Assembly. I got there by defeating an incumbent of 22 years, and despite that, they elected me president of the Assembly for a year. When I burnt out of health care, I worked for Lake and Peninsula Borough for 2 years as their borough clerk, and that was one of the best job experiences that I've ever had. That and being on the assembly showed me that individuals can really make a difference in our government, probably because it is small. And it's at that point that I decided that I could effectively provide some service to the community too.
In the process of trying to get elected, what issues do you feel, you can bring to the people?
The primary ones that I'm concerned with are economic issues, and that has to do with fishing, to support it so that it continues to be a viable industry for the future. As I mentioned at the council meeting, I've got a grandson now who's 2, and I hope that when he gets old enough that he has the opportunity to choose to fish if he wants to, that it's still a viable way to work. I think we need a lot of support for Fish and Game, for enforcement, protection, data collection. And the other issue is to develop something that's an alternative to fishing or to supplement it, and that to me is to tourism. Again, that depends on the community's response to bringing in outsiders, but Katmai Park has 40,000 visitors every summer, and statistics from '86 in Bristol Bay show that there were 16,000 sport fishermen that came, and they spent $45 million. I mean, if we could tap into all this money, it could provide some staff positions or fund any other number of worthy projects.
Okay, is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about?
A little more personally, I've been married for 24 years. I have 2 daughters and a 2-year-old grandson. I think being married that length of time, I've developed skills in what I call the 4 C's: communication, cooperation, collaboration, and compromise. And that's how I prefer to work with people, is collaboratively. And I think that's very important in this endeavor.
Wilson says she'll wait until after the legislative session before seeking endorsements. Alaska pilots don't like federal regulations that require blue dye in home heating oil. Air taxi operators say the blue dye makes the heating fuel look like aviation gas. They worried someone might mistakenly put the highly volatile avgas in someone's furniture, which could cause an explosion. Someone could also accidentally put heating oil in an airplane gas tank. That could cause the plane to crash. When the avgas runs out, the heating fuel reaches the engine. Alaska's congressional delegation is asking the Clinton administration to change the regs, but many dealers already have the blue-dyed fuel in stock. Kuskokwim area herring fishermen are looking forward to a record harvest this spring. Biologists are projecting a harvest of 45 tons of herring that compares to the last record catch in 1994, when fishermen took 2,800 tons. The only problem is prices for herring are down, so despite the abundance of fish, there may be a shortage of processors. Last year, processors didn't even show up for the Kuskokwim area fishery. Right now, fishermen are waiting to hear about herring sales during the Japanese New Year. Japan buys almost all of Alaska's herring roe. During the New Year, the Japanese give each other boxes of the herring roe, which is a delicacy in their country. Sales will tell fishermen if the recession in Japan is moderating. Fishermen are also waiting to hear from the San Francisco herring fishery how that went. That also gives fishermen a chance of how strong or soft the market is. Guyana Nuchi, thank you for listening. Reporting from public radio and television station in KYUK, Bethel, Alaska, I'm John Active.
Thank you, John. We look forward to your stories from KYUK TV in Bethel next week. Let's turn now to the village of Marshall. This time of year, most people are waking up to an alarm clock, but not in Marshall. They're waking up to a cock-a-doodle-doo. a chicken, and a rooster. For the last 2 weeks, these rather unusual guests have been on loan from the neighboring school of Russian Mission. The village of Marshall has a population of about 270, with approximately 85 children in school. Marshall, also known as Fortuna Ledge, started life as a community about 70 years ago as a gold mining town. Back then, there was a native village about 5 miles downriver and another native village about 25 miles upriver. Although there were many old village sites along the river, there never seemed to have been one where Marshall was located. About 1910, placer gold was discovered. In the 1920s, the community approached a population of 1,000. The majority of these residents were non-native. They were transient miners. However, from the earliest days, there were native people active in the community and directly or indirectly involved in the mining. In spite of the outside influence, the native people living in Marshall were living in a region where they had always lived, and they were able to retain much of their language, skills, and culture. The typical Marshall resident of today seems to have little trouble with the foot in each culture.
Father and son game.
On the evening of January 21st, Andy Boots, who's the homeschool coordinator, and William Dunny, the community education aide, planned and coordinated a fun game night for the elementary students. The last game of the evening featured a father and son game with the 6th and 7th grades and their fathers or their uncles. The older gentleman in the undershirt and red vest is Nick Andrew. He demonstrated the wisdom of age by finding the sweet spot for scoring and staying close to it. All the proceeds from the game were donated by the students to Moses Dunny, who lost his house and all his personal property to a fire recently. Thank you, Mr. Roger E. Adams, principal of the Marshall School, home of the Mustangs. I'm looking forward to more video of the Marshall Band, by the way. As a matter of fact, if you're a native band, please send me video of your group. I'd love to put you on Heartbeat Alaska. It's real simple. Just give me a call. I'll tell you how it's done. Let's turn now to the community calendar, news and events from around the state. Stay tuned for satellite education on the North Slope. That's right after these messages.
During the Roman era, 28 was considered old.
In the 1800s, 60 was over the hill.
You got it! You gotta taste it all! Oh, the taste of Diet Coke. You gotta taste it all! Yeah, the taste of Diet Coke. You got
it. Arctic Alaska. The people look out beyond the ice where the sea promises another year of life for the villages. To the south, at KYUK, and down where Nageak Pass cuts through the white shoulders of the Brooks Range, hunters listen for the passing of caribou. In the villages of the Arctic, something old as earth pulls the people out to the sea and to the frozen slopes for the hunt. For generations, the young have moved with their parents and elders to the whaling camps. Together, the families celebrate the bounty of the earth, the sea, and the respect they feel for all living things and for each other. Then suddenly, something changed. The young were taken from the families and sent away to learn the values of an alien culture. And something important was lost in the villages along this northern shore.
When I went to education at a young age, it was at great distance, a couple thousand miles from my parents, to better prepare us for the future. They make sure that we get the best education. At that time, the best education was to send us off into boarding schools.
It was terrible. It was, being away from home was very hard for me. I had nightmares about not being able to get out of that boarding school.
It was done with the best of intentions, but the children became strangers to their own culture. They lost the lessons of the hunt and of the sea and land that had been at the heart of their culture for thousands of years.
When I first got elected, there was some plans being tossed around about setting up a boarding school here in Borough for our 7 outlying villages.
We asked, as a parent, would you be willing to send your child to a boarding school? And as a student, would you be willing to go to a boarding school? And we only had one parent in the survey out of, I don't know how many numbers, indicate that they'd be willing to send their child to a boarding school. It just didn't make sense.
But what did make sense? Here was a vast trackless wilderness of tundra and icebound shore. 8 isolated villages scattered within an area of 88,000 square miles, a region the size of Pennsylvania and Ohio combined. There were no roads connecting the villages, and no roads connecting the villages to the outside world. Within the villages were some 350 high school-age youngsters. The people had decided against taking the children from the villages and bringing them to a central school. But they wondered, could there be a way to bring the central school to the villages and to the students?
It's been a really nice morning. We're going to start out with a village roll call. Good morning, Wainwright. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah. How about Nageak Pass?
Morning. Rather than putting a boarding school together, why don't we set up a delivery system where our students in our smallest schools can have access to master teachers?
At KYUK manit pisi.
The solution involved a complex tapestry of advanced communications technologies called distance delivery education. Central to the system is a technology called compressed digital video, which makes face-to-face instruction by interactive video teleconferencing an affordable reality. It is a means of bringing the students of all the villages together into a single community of learning. Face-to-face instruction by video is supplemented by the use of a wide area computer network, interactive computer graphics, fax transmission, electronic mail, and network-based computer-assisted instruction. Video and computer signals are carried over a fiber optic link to the school district network control center. From there, they are relayed by microwave to an earth station, uplinked to the Aurora 2 satellite, and then back down to the villages. It is September in Arctic Alaska. In Borough, young people from the 7 villages gather to compete in a cross-country run. Since they live so far apart, one might think they were strangers.
I have found through this system, when our kids get together physically in one location, the warm-up time is very, very quick. They're immediately communicating, they're immediately linked up.
I need a book.
Every high school student on the North Slope is provided access to a personal computer. Using electronic mail, they remain in constant contact with teachers, other students, and even their friends in other villages. Between Borough and Point Hope, a raven's flight of words streams upward to a circling moon, and then down again to a village by the sea. The young people ask about the hunt. It is a conversation as old as the whaling culture itself, carried on the wings of tomorrow.
Christian Delivery is helping us mold our students for our future. Technology, the resources that we apply for our own needs have changed, but human values, Nageak values are still there. That will never change.
Thank you so much for joining me on Heartbeat Alaska. Like I said before, if you're a native band, get me that video. I'd love to put you on Heartbeat Alaska. It's real easy. Just give me a call. As a matter of fact, if you're from a village or community that I haven't done a story on, it's about time. Just give me a call and I'll tell you how it's done. Thank you so much for joining me for another Heartbeat Alaska Native News Across the North. See you next week.